and then restart it. Okay, so welcome everybody. Tonight we're going to have Susan Desjardins talk to us about a project that is consuming a lot of energy of the Loma Prieta chapter that is called Bay Alive. Susan is the volunteer chair of Bay Alive, vice chair on the executive committee of the Loma Prieta chapter. She is a retired engineer and a high school teacher. Susan worked for 20 years as a process product engineer focused on air pollution control technologies. She changed career to become a chemistry, physics, and environmental science teacher at Cupertino High School for 15 years. Susan lives in Pacifica, and she enjoys hiking and cooking out there and chasing grandkids. So we share many of the same interests. So if everybody but Susan, and including myself, will mute themselves, then we can get started. Susan's is
all right. Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Gary. Let me go ahead and I guess I have two versions of this. Both of them are open. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. I want to give, I want to let you know that there are a couple other Bay Alive folks here tonight, Geeta Dev and Eileen McLaughlin. And so, and we've got such a small group. I'd really like people to, if they have questions at that time, just go ahead and interrupt me. I do want to give thanks to Sheila Brady, who helped me get started on this presentation. Once I get started on something, I'm pretty good, but getting started is sometimes difficult. So she gave me a lot of help getting this presentation going. I don't know why it's not advancing. Okay, sorry. I guess I have to scroll up and down. So the agenda tonight is a little bit more information about Bay Alive, the challenge, and a little bit of information about the Bay as well. The challenge of sea level rise in San Francisco Bay, a very brief history. Why the Bay is important. What is nature-based adaptation for sea level rise, and then a little bit about the effect of sea level rise on groundwater and toxins. Sorry, I gotta work on my touch. Just want to acknowledge that the land around the Bay Area are primarily Ohlone to the east and the south, and Miwok primarily to the north. And the native peoples lived as many years ago, it's believed as 9,000 years ago in this area. And the Bay Area had one of the most, believed to have one of the most dense native populations in North America. When European explorers first came to this area, it was reported that the sky was black with flocks of geese and ducks, and that the streams were so full of spawning fish that you could walk across it. So just imagine what that must have looked like. Oh. Okay, the Bay Alive campaign started in 2020 with a Rohloff Bequest to the Loma Prieta chapter to preserve and protect San Francisco Bay. We do share funds with the San Francisco Bay chapter, with the Redwood chapter, because those are counties that ring the Bay. And we also share some of our funding with Sierra Club California. I'm going to talk mostly about some of the work of the 3-chapter group and the work of the Loma Prieta chapter. I got involved I retired from teaching in June of 2019. And so we were just hearing rumors about this bequest at that time. And so I don't remember if I volunteered or if somebody tapped me on the shoulder, but it was good timing to get involved in the Bay Alive campaign for me. Just a little bit about some of the different campaigns that we have going on in Loma Prieta. And I realized that this list is long, and most of it is in San Mateo County, although the longest program or project that we've been working on is following the Moffett Park specific plan in Sunnyvale. And this is a complete redevelopment of a once almost entirely industrial area into a mixed use area. It's right on the bay, very, there's some wetlands there near Lockheed, if you know the area. We got involved pretty early on. It hasn't come out. There has not been a notice of preparation of a draft environmental impact report yet. We expect that soon. But we get involved in many community meetings, and we chimed in pretty early on about sea level rise, and that was not something that was addressed at all in any of the plans. After the, and then there was a sea level rise study session that was put on by the city of Sunnyvale. And then shortly after that, we mentioned the impact of what's the impact of sea level rise on groundwater, and then they did a groundwater study. So I think we were pretty involved. We also got I'll talk about our Bay advocacy program, educational program. We also got many people to write letters to city council members about what we want to see in Moffett Park in the future. One of the projects that we're heavily involved in right now is the Ravenswood Business District specific plan update, and that's in East Palo Alto. This is 3 different developers developing right along the bayshore in previous Romic chemical site, if you've heard of that, and other sites right on the bayshore. So it's not, by any means taking away wetlands or anything like that, but we want to be really careful. They want to put up large buildings, they very close to wetlands, so we're following that very closely. And around that area and along the coast is the Safer Levee project, and that is organized or run by San Francisco Creek Joint Powers Authority. And so that has had an NOP. Both of these last 2 have had a notice of preparation of a draft environmental impact report. So we have given comments on the notice of preparation. So we're expecting to see draft environmental impact reports coming out on those. We have been involved in Mountain View and the North Bayshore. That's the big Google development. Also giving input on the shoreline wildlife management plan there. I want to talk about what a horizontal levee is a little bit later, and so we'll come back to that. And Nina, who is here tonight, has been very involved in Redwood Life, a very big development. And so if we have time, we can talk a little bit, we can hear a little bit more about that. Also, Gita was quite involved in Redwood City Ferry and Port Development. Eileen there's now a new alternative coming out for the West Bay Sanitary District project in Menlo Park that Eileen has prompted them to take a look at. And then right now we're looking at a notice of preparation for bioscience speculative development on the Bayshore in Burlingame. All right. I do not have this touch very okay. So the 3-chapter committee is a group like if you look at all the counties, the 9 counties around the Bay Area, they fit all into 3 different chapters: the San Francisco Bay chapter, our chapter, Loma Prieta, San Mateo, and Santa Clara counties. Also San Benito, but that's not on the Bay. And then the Redwood chapter. And so what we really, and I'll kind of come back to this issue right at the end of the presentation. What we really want to see is an integrated regional response to sea level rise. So every city isn't solving the problem themselves when they're looking at what to do with their bayshore. We're also trying to provide information and education to elected officials and planning departments, but also just to the public as well. And we really want to bring nature-based strategies to the forefront for the benefit of for the Bay. So one of the things we've done in the last 2 years is we had what we've termed the Bay Advocate Program. This was a 10 to 12 week program the first year we did it was the fall of 2020, and then we repeated it in the fall of 2021. We don't have plans to do it this year. We'll talk about what we are looking at. We're thinking of bringing this back in the fall of 2023. So depending on the year, it was a 10 or 12-week course, one evening per week, about an hour and a half session. We talked a lot about the history and the ecosystem services of the Bay. The first one that we did was all Loma Prieta. So we had 3 case studies that we studied a proposed development. The 3 that we studied were the Moffett Park specific plan, the Cargill salt ponds in Redwood City, and a development in Burlingame which has since been scrapped. The second year we were doing this jointly with the other 2 Sierra Club chapters on the Bay, and our 3 case studies were we picked basically a case study in each of the different chapters. So the one in Loma Prieta was the Ravenswood Business Development Specific Plan Update, which is in East Palo Alto. And then one was Mare Island Development, and the other one was Point Malate in Richmond. And what's good news about the Point Malate one, and that was one where we had people write to both the city council, because the city council of Richmond had approved luxury condos right on the Bay, right? It's the shoreline it's right above the Richmond San Rafael Bridge, and it looks due west, right straight into the beautiful islands and hills of Marin County. And we got we, along with other, Richmond Alliance is a big advocating, but we sent letters to the current city council saying, we don't think you want to do this because there's no infrastructure for any of this development, and you're it's going to make it's very fire prone area as well as be sensitive Bay habitat, and we don't think you, city of Richmond, can afford that. In the big picture, and so they voted it down, and now it's going to become an East Bay Regional Park. So that was good news after this course was done. So we did do site visits to the 3 in 2021. We couldn't do that in 2020 because of COVID. So we had limited number of people, 25 people were able to go to the site, each of the site visits the second year. We worked on advocacy skills. We basically learned about these different case studies from experts, and then we had the opportunity to ask questions, make statements, verbal statements in small groups, write letters. We wrote to East Bay Regional Parks too, asking them to take on Point Malate. So we got a kind of a very low stress chance of working on some of those advocacy skills. We also had guest speakers. Our guest speakers ranged from Kevin Mullen, our current assembly member. We also had Supervisor Joe Smidian. We had Supervisor Cindy Chavez speak. We also had activist Lenny Roberts spoke, and then our 3 chapter chair, Arthur Feinstein, who has been working on Bay advocacy for many, many years, spoke at our course. So those were, and this picture doesn't have anything to do with our course. I apologize. Probably shouldn't be, but because they didn't involve kids and it didn't involve doing restoration. But okay, and then one of the other things our educational committee did was we put on a webinar last year in May 2021, and this was a 3-day webinar. It was 3 hours in the morning from 9 to noon, and we had various people talk about, in the first day, what is nature-based adaptation. And so these are experts. John Bourgeois had been in the South Bay Salt Pond Restoration Project Manager. He's now with Valley Water, and different people talking about the wildlife there, different people talking about what Patty Oikawa will talk a little bit about this measured carbon sequestration in wetlands. That was day 1 speakers, and I'll show you where to find these. We not only have recordings of these, but we also have the slide decks that the speakers used, and I can show you where to find those on our website at the end. Day two, we had these speakers. So we had basically two panels and a little Q&A, and then another panel Q&A. And that's where to use nature-based adaptations. You know, and I'll talk more about what I mean by nature-based adaptations in this talk. And then the last day was more about, you know, what has been done, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and how do you go about getting funding. There's a lot of different organizations involved, as you might imagine. What we're doing this year, as far as educational activities go, is we put on a CEQA training course. And this was, there were two presenters. One was a urban planner. They both worked for Chute Mahali and Weinberger, who Sierra Club has worked with in litigation as well. And that was in July, and we had something like 58 attendees, I believe. We would like to offer a follow-on course. The feedback we got from the attendees were that, you know, we'd really like to look at a real EIR and what are good, you know, develop comments for it. What are good comments? So we don't have a date for that yet, but we'd like to do that in the not too distant future. And then we are planning to put on a dark skies and bird safe design webinar in November, probably in the afternoon of November 16th, right between elections and the holidays. And then, so just talking a little bit about sea level rise. If you're an organization in California and you want to predict what's going to happen with sea level rise, you're to use the guidance of the Ocean Protection Council, who every 5 years updates their sea level rise guidance. And so the rule of thumb now is, if you're going to be doing anything of permanence, you need to plan for 3 feet of sea level rise by the year 2050. And so this is showing low, medium, high, and extreme high risk. So because that's a conservative estimate on what sea level rise should be. And so this came out in 2018, so we're due for another update next year in 2023. And what's interesting is, in the last couple times when the sea level rise estimates have been updated, they've always been higher than the previous estimates. So as we learn more, they're predicting higher sea level rise. And so what does that mean for the Bay Area? And so really, if we plan, we can end up with a more resilient and flexible shoreline versus one that's you know, rigid and polluted and very vulnerable to sea level rise. So I want to talk a little. I'm going to jump to a little bit of history right now. So if you look back in the 1850s, what our Bay Area looked like was, we had quite a bit of wetlands, and 80% of those wetlands have been lost. They've been filled in. They've been converted to agriculture. They've been, you know, made into polders, which are diked off areas for agriculture or for different, you know, for different purposes. And so one of the goals, let's see, I'm going to get to that in a second. So sticking with history for a second. So during World War II, there's quite a bit of industrialization that happened in the Bay Area. A lot of military bases went up. We had a big shipbuilding center. And if you took that to kind of like the next logical conclusion, there was a plan to completely dike off the bay, except for that very small area in the middle. So I don't know if you can see here's the Golden Gate, Angel Island. And so here we've got, you know, this is all fresh water. So we've got a dam here, and we've got a ship channel here, and we've got another dam here. And this was called the Reber Plan. And there's a lot of people that were backing the Reber Plan back then. And a lot of the construction that went on in the 50s, post-war construction, the bay was used as a big dump especially for construction waste. And even today, we have a lot of landfills there, but a lot of the stuff weren't legitimate, you know, landfills. They were just garbage. And then here come the 60s, the late 50s and early 60s, and these 3 women created Save the Bay, and they just took on one city at a time, and they they worked just to show people the value of having a vibrant shoreline and not to continue to fill it or to dump in it. And so Save the Bay started in 1961. And then, so a little bit of a shifting mindset over time, where the value of the bay is more recognized today than it was during those industrialization years. We've had massive wetland restoration efforts, and I'll show you kind of a little graphic on that. Many communities have participated. We've got a lot of the Bay Trail completed. There's nature centers along the Bay Shore in many communities. In 1965, we developed the Bay Conservation and Development Commission, and this was created for maybe three main reasons. One, to prevent further fill of the bay. You actually have to have a permit from them. And it's only recently that they are starting to look places where there may be some strategic reasons to put fill in the bay, but mainly they were started to stop filling the bay. They also are trying to provide access to the public everywhere around the bay, and also to provide a band around the bay 100 feet from the high tide mark where development cannot occur. What they haven't done is figured out, well, how do you do that in light of sea level rise? And so I want to come back to that issue right at the end of the presentation. And then 1972, we had Don Edwards San Francisco Bay Wildlife Refuge established for the main purpose of providing wildlife habitat. And then this is the graphic on wetland restoration. So again, if you look at circa 1800s, we had almost 200,000 acres. Our goal is to get 100,000 acres of that back. And I think we have procured enough land so that we're within 50,000 acres now of land that's been set aside for wetland restoration. So looking at San Francisco Bay, it's the largest estuary in the Western Hemisphere. It accounts for about 77% of California's remaining perennial estuarine wetlands. It's one of North America's most ecologically important estuaries. It's the home to thousands of species of animals, including endemic, threatened, and endangered species. I'll talk about a couple of those. It's a critical stopover for hundreds of thousands of birds yearly on the Pacific Flyway. And it's got over 130 species of fish, including salmon. And so again, wetlands provide the habitat. It's a lot of open space and recreation, which provide economic benefits. It removes pollutants from the water. It provides flood storage when there's a lot of rain. It attenuates wave energy, and it stores carbon. Another thing that especially in the South Bay, most of our bay is very shallow, and so it allows sunlight to penetrate, and it's got very, very high primary productivity, which makes it a real good place to sequester carbon. So again, this is just a graphic looking at the Pacific Flyway for shorebirds and waterfowl. And again, it's fish and wildlife habitat. Like I said, the ecosystems were a lot more diverse and a lot more plentiful before industrialization, but we want to try to preserve what biodiversity we have. There are a lot of invasive species that were introduced because especially people wanted to grow their own shellfish. They brought their East Coast or their European varieties and established them in the bay. So we've got to deal with that as well. So just about endangered tidal marsh species, you may have heard of the salt marsh harvest mouse, is an endangered species that we have, and also the California ridgeways rail, and then some plant varieties. And we've had one of our Bay advocacy program people has been showing us little video clips he gets of the ridgeways rail. I don't have that with me though, unfortunately. It's also, the Bay is open space and recreation, and we've learned in COVID that this is really important to have access to open space. and provides, you know, a lot of provides open space for a lot of visitors each year. So one thing I mentioned was that the wetlands clean water. And so when you have wetlands, you've got a place where water can stagnate over a period of time. It's got bacteria that break down contaminants. There's also plants that can take up some contaminants. And it also provides that wildlife habitat. And then you've got a slower release of water that is cleaner from the wetlands. And then this is a slide that I took from Patty Oyakawa's research. And I'm not going to try to explain all the numbers, but what she's done is she's done some very, and if you're interested in looking at her whole talk, it's on our website. But looking at the carbon balance and exchange of different carbon species in wetlands, and found that, you know, around half of the carbon remained on site. So at sea level rise now threatens some of these valuable aspects of wetlands. The most obvious thing is we've got a lot of communities right along the bay shore that are in danger. We're also looking at, we have very shallow wetlands, and so if those get flooded, and they're going to die. And so we've got to look at migration space for these wetlands upland, so that we don't lose all the wetlands. We're also looking at water quality degradation if we don't have wetlands. Habitat destruction. We're also looking at buried toxins on the shores that may become, may be re-released into water. We're looking at groundwater salinization, loss of sedimentation, and loss of carbon sink if we lose our wetlands. And so this is just pulled from one of our webinar series slides, just showing, and just showing a lot of industries along, you know, San Mateo and Santa Clara counties, but also think about what infrastructure is right along the bay. There's the highways along the bay. There's a lot of landfills along the bay. Wastewater treatment plants, really important infrastructure. So one thing I did want to talk about a little bit more is what is the effect of sea level rise on groundwater? And so I'm stealing a lot of slides with her permission from Dr. Christina Hill at UC Berkeley, who has done a lot of work on this. And this is actually in San Leandro. This is at the King Tides, where we had groundwater bubbling up through manhole covers, located about 250 feet from the bay's edge. And I've got some graphics that she made that kind of explain what's going on with groundwater rise. And so if you look at, sorry about that, my dog is barking. So if you look at the bay shore, where you got salty groundwater that extends a certain distance inland, depending on the geomorphology, then you've also got fresh groundwater that is pretty shallow in some places around the bay. And you've got your levee and a marsh, and you've got a road, you've got a sewer pipe, you've got a creek, and then you've got some pollution that's been capped. And this is kind of typical of, you know, a landfill that's not used anymore that was on the bay. And so as that salty water rises, you now are starting to push water into the sewer pipes, because these are often cracked clay type pipes. You're also pushing groundwater up into the creek, and then if that salty groundwater continues to rise under, now you've got, and if you think about the sewer pipe as being any kind of underground infrastructure, you've got salt water which is corroding any kind of conduit or piping, freshwater piping underground. And now you've got flooding around along the creek. And now if you've got pollution in that landfill, you've been able to mobilize it with groundwater rise. So this is something we bring up in every site that we talk to about sea level rise along the bay. And then an interesting study in 2012, and this is on the East Coast. You see Long Island Sound, but it showed that if sea level rose by 3 feet, it could cause the groundwater to rise as far inland as 3 miles from the shoreline. So it really depends. That's why modeling needs to be done in each particular scenario. I'm not saying this would happen everywhere, but you need to look at the kind of ground that you have to see if that's an issue. And so this is just showing you what it looks like if you've got a storm or sanitary sewer that's sitting at ground level. It's gonna, or below ground level, you're gonna get a lot of leaking into it. You're gonna lose capacity. And then another interesting thing, and one of the sites we're looking at right now has an old contaminated gasoline site in Burlingame, right close to the bay. And this is, if groundwater rises and pushes, volatile organic compounds that can be airborne out of the soil, that they can actually back up into sewer line and cause problems. So we want to make sure. And then also there's a lot of places where there's been bay fill, very liquefaction sensitive soils where they've got high susceptibility in a seismic event to lose structural, its ability to hold foundations and things like that. And this is just showing that they're around very vulnerable communities as well, like Viso and East Palo Alto in our neck of the woods. And then levee projects. So there's a series of levee projects going on, and Eileen could probably talk a lot more about the ones in Santa Clara County. We've, like I said before, chimed in on the South Bay, or the Safe Levee one that's up in well, I guess it's in along the East Palo Alto border and around Facebook. But they're very disjointed. And in Burlingame, we're looking at a project that is asking the developers all in each little part of the bay to put up their own levee system, and somehow they're all going to come together. And so I'm not sure who approves those designs. So so there's a lot of work still to be done to figure out how to protect our shoreline. There's something that the San Francisco Estuary Institute developed called the Adaptation Atlas, and this is a really good resource. It looks at the entire bay shore, and it identifies the opportunity for nature-based adaptation. So I'll just show you a little map. So this is from the shoreline, they call it the Adaptation Atlas. What it does is it divides the entire bay area into, I can't remember how many there are, 30 different operational land units, and they're done based on the geography and the watersheds of each of these areas, not on ownership or anything like that, but it indicates what might be a nature-based solution for sea level rise in that area. And so some of the nature-based strategies, why we don't just want to build seawalls, and so I'm going to talk about some of these. Some of these are things like eelgrass and oysters tend to be solutions in the northern part of the bay, and that's just giving you more stuff for the soil to hold on to, a place where sedimentation can occur. I'm going to talk a little bit more about marshes and what we call ecotone levees. And so this is from the Adaptation Atlas. So there's a lot of different things to try. So the last three I wanted to mention here is, like I said, we want our wetlands to be able to migrate upland. So we want to make sure that there's places for that to happen, and we don't develop those places. And also improving creek to bay connections. And there's a lot of work being done on Calabasas and San Tomas entry into make them more like a natural entry, so they're not culverts. You get place for the streams to meander, and then green stormwater infrastructure to hold some of that water upstream. So I wanted to explain a little bit the value of a marsh in front of a levee. And so the top picture shows a taller levee, but no marsh in front of it. And then the bottom one shows a shorter levee and but a marsh there. And so, and it's showing you 100-year high water level. And of course the marsh isn't going to do well if it's always underwater. So it can't be underwater all the time. But what a marsh does for you is it attenuates the wave energy. It also provides a place for the wave action to slow down, the water to slow down and drop out sediment. So you start creating this layer of sedimentation in the marsh that you wouldn't get if you didn't have the marsh there. So in effect, you can get away with a shorter levee inland if you maintain a tidal marsh in front of it. And then I want to talk about an ecotone levee. Ecotone levees are sometimes called horizontal levees. What it means is it's a very, very long horizontal run for a fairly short vertical run. Some people call them 20-to-1 horizontal to vertical. But what you have is you have tidal marsh, and you know, toward the bay, and then grassland, and then you've got this this manufactured levee system that's buried in it. And so what has happened in Oro Lomo Sanitary District, which is in San Leandro, they actually built a kind of a pilot version where they put in all different kinds of plants in the marsh area, and they looked at and they put wastewater upstream of it, and not only to just water the marsh, but also to try to remove or to polish the wastewater to remove heavy metals and pharmaceuticals, something that is not done very well by our wastewater treatment plants. And so they've got a lot of data on what kind of plants do that. And so Palo Alto is proposing to build a horizontal levee near the airport, near their wastewater treatment plant, and take part of their effluent and do a similar thing with it, and then measure how it works. And so this is just looking at, there's a lot of different pieces to the puzzle. And so you want to look at restoring the whole system. And so got different choices depending on what depth of the bay you're looking at. And so this is just another thing. We haven't done a lot of what they call mudflat augmentation, which is adding some sediment. There's a few places in the bay where they've added some sediment. But we're definitely looking at creek bayland connections. They're looking at that on Colma Creek in San Mateo County. And of course, giving space for the wetlands to migrate upland is important. Okay, so this is just kind of like there isn't just one solution. There's going to have to be a series of solutions as sea levels rise and as we, as we march through time. And then there's also, this is from the Adaptation Atlas, is just what are the regulatory, financial, and policy tools that we need. And we've been a big proponent of overlay zones along the bay for that, migration space, setbacks and buffers, building codes, conservation easements, and tax incentives and special assessments, transfer of development rights, giving the owners a chance to develop elsewhere away from the bay, and outright buyouts. And so there's many organizations involved. We're still learning about them, and so and some of those are really scientific organizations collecting data. Some of them are doing restoration. Some of them are monitoring the bay and making sure that we understand what's going on. And some of them are really there to permit, to facilitate restoration. And then I think, and then this is, Eileen was helping me with this presentation, and she was feeling bad that we didn't have enough attention to the Guadalupe regional group. And so she put together this slide which shows what the shoreline looks like around El Viso, which is a Guadalupe regional group, and a couple things to take a look at. I know that there's, and so she may want to chime in on this. There's a levee that's that is being designed, and and working on different phases of the levee. There also are some biosolid ponds. I think that's on here.
Right. Would you like me, if I can,
Yeah.
I can walk people through the map a little bit.
Sure.
I can't use it's your slide, but I mainly did it because I knew it was the end of a long presentation, and Susan has gone through this gamut of really giving you a good idea of what Bay Alive is about. So, but it occurred to me that Guadalupe Regional Group might want to look at what are the areas within, this group's area that maybe need, should get some attention. And so that's why this was put together. And I have numbered them specifically to what you see over there on the left. And you'll notice that there's more number 5s than anything else. And I put that last because everything else gets to it. One, we have had intensive development. Google owns a lot of buildings down in here now, and these warehouses here, and there's a whole lot of Topgolf and everything else in San Jose. Just can't keep its hands out of just building. This is right on the shore of the Guadalupe River and right by the bay. So that's been going on down here, and that's a concern where you're near these wetlands. Then we have which has impacted, by the way, 237, which is what you see down at the bottom. Then there's a regional wastewater plant, and that's number 2. And if you look at that and look up toward past that 5 up to the right of there, you'll see the biosolid beds. These are active biosolid beds, which the plant uses now for drying out until they can be removed, the biosolids from their processes. They are in the process of a plant rebuilding in plants that will instead take all of that and use them to produce methane and energy. So and they have a project going on, which by the beginning of next year, some of these ponds may not be needed. Some of them may be available for other uses, which is what we're looking at. Then there's the Shoreline Sea Level Rise Levee. This is the Corps of Engineers project, which runs from Alviso County Park out straight out and then over to the Environmental Ed Center at the refuge right now. And it's supposed to run all the way along that jagged, that kind of stair-step edge of the treatment plant area next to Pond A18. That has been so right now the project is only, and the only thing that's funded is the project between the county park and across the Union Pacific tracks over to the EEC. The rest of it was supposed to be included in the project, but has been dropped because there's not enough money, and they don't know where the money is going to come from that would protect the plant. And part of the project is to restore Pond A18. So that's another. There's some projects that we need to watch, and then the numbers have moved here on this slide. I don't know what happened, but then there's the Capital Corridor expansion vision. Capital Corridor is planning to convert this, has a plan to replace the one single track Union Pacific track with a triple track. And in order to, that project can be done in a couple of different ways. One way could actually benefit the development of wetlands here along the bay and protect them for the future. And other ways could not. Right now it's a berm that just breaks up wetlands and is insufficient. Trestles would get them off the ground. And the other is how to avoid putting three railroad tracks through Alviso, that town. And finally, the 5s are all about tidal wetland migration space, which Susan has been talking about. These are opportunities we have. She mentioned the Calabasas Creek, and this is not Alviso directly, but the Calabasas Creek and San Tomas Aquino Creek. There's a project over here which is going forward in conjunction with the Salt Pond restoration on a forward-looking project in Sun by Valley Water. Then I'll swing back over to, remember, I already mentioned Pond A18, which is number 5, with the big pond over on the right. The obviously, the biosolid beds are a big opportunity if they become available to use as tidal wetland migration space. Then we have the buffer lands that surround, so that you see 5 and 2 places on undeveloped land that are also close enough to the bay to be meaningful tidal migration space. And this is lands that we want to work to preserve. And there's no one in city government in San Jose who's been willing to even consider those things, really. And that's a problem we've had. Of truth politically in San Jose is that all of these lands, all of these special sensitive lands sit in one district in a 10-district city. So there's one person who represents them, and if that person likes to build things, which is what it's been most of the time, we don't get a lot of attention. So that's something that might be interesting for the Foothill group. Now, I just wanted to mention the Don Edwards National Wildlife Refuge represents all of the ponds you see in this picture virtually, except A4, which belongs to Valley Water, and A18, which belongs to the treatment plant. And it is the value there. It was founded to build wildlife habitat, but it was wetland wildlife habitat, and it has secured the 30,000 acres of that 100,000 that Susan mentioned. 30,000 of it is in the refuge, protecting wetlands that can be very, very valuable in protecting the shorelines and the bay. So that's something that we want to remember, that maybe for wildlife first principle, but it protects all of us.
Thank you, Eileen. Well, we are about done. I have one more slide left because it's late breaking news. And that was that Senate Bill 867 passed the Senate and Assembly yesterday. This was a bill authored by Senator Laird. He's not from the Bay, but he's from Santa Cruz, San Luis Obispo, down his district. And what this bill would require cities on the Bay to have a sea level rise adaptation plan. The bill still requires funding to make it a go, and so that's expected to happen. It would require BCDC, and so this is coming back to BCDC as the logical organization to do this, to develop guidelines to be used to evaluate these plans. And that I don't think that cities would need plans until the mid-30s, 2030s. But it requires BCDC to develop the guidelines that are going to be used to evaluate these adaptation plans by December 2023, next year. And so what we want to do is we want to jump on this right away and start working with other environmental organizations and social equity groups that represent the communities around the Bay to influence those guidelines and to make sure that they've got the right stakeholders there. So, and then the last slide is just a nice picture and my email address. So if you're interested, I did want to show you on the website where to find Bay Alive information. But before I did that, I wanted to see if there were any questions or any slides that people wanted to take a look at again. Oh, okay.
It's been somewhat of an overwhelming presentation.
Yeah, a lot. Well, you said an hour, so I got
yeah.
I know there's a lot of stuff in there, but we will probably post this somewhere on the Bay Alive if anybody wanted to take a look at the slides again.
Yeah, I think the Guadalupe group, we have a Facebook page, and if you would send me your slides, and we can put this video there, and I'll make sure you get the video one way or the other.
The video will be put on our YouTube channel, and hence to Facebook.
Okay, and then you can send a link so I guess James can get it from you, and so we can put it on Bay Alive as well.
I'll send you a link. I don't know what the chapter does with it. subscribe to our channel.
We
Post
should.
it on
It's
the chapter.
lonely. It's mighty lonely.
We post this on the chapter YouTube channel.
Oh, good.
All right. Well, I did want to show you. Let me stop sharing and then I'll. Maybe I can share again and find. Yeah, I'm not. It's actually, if you go to the main Loma Prieta, I don't know why I had it open a second ago. If you go to the main page and right underneath the Guardian of Nature benefit is a Bay Alive, and it says if you're interested in getting information, there's a button, and we'll take your information and get back to you with. So you basically can opt into getting information about our program. And also access to the slide decks of the speakers at our webinar.
Susan, on the last slide, you put your personal email. Would you
Yeah.
prefer to put your Sierra Club email?
I'm fine leaving my personal email. That's fine.
Okay.
I forgot what my Sierra Club is.
Okay, well, let me, I'll end it shortly. Thank you again, Susan, and thank you, Eileen, for stepping in and pointing out things that are really happening in the Guadalupe regional area. This is a very complex problem, and I thank you both for all the energy you're putting in, and the others who are not here. So wish everybody stay healthy. Stay cool if you can. So unless there's another question or something, I'll end the meeting.
All right. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you again.
Thank
Okay.
you all.
Good night, everybody.